You know that perfect 80s movie ending you've loved your whole life? Yeah, total accident. Reshot in a panic or improvised on the spot. Iconic final scenes were never supposed to happen. And if the studios had their way, we'd remember these movies completely differently. Here are 10 endings from classic 80s films that were saved, sabotaged, or completely rewritten by mistake. If you've somehow never seen The Breakfast Club, it's the ultimate 80s teen movie. 5 high school stereotypes get stuck in Saturday detention and end up oversharing their trauma in a library. Very John Hughes. But the ending, the slow walk, the Simple Minds song, and that freeze-frame fist pump was not planned. Judd Nelson just improvised it during filming. They weren't even shooting the ending that day. But John Hughes saw it in the dailies, went "that's it," and dropped it over the final music cue. And that song, Don't You Forget About Me, was a last-minute replacement. Billy Idol turned it down, so they gave it to this unknown band called Simple Minds. The ending and the song blew up together, still the biggest hit they ever had. This was the movie that made Tom Hanks a movie star. He plays a 12-year-old kid named Josh who makes a wish on a creepy carnival machine called Zoltar. The next morning, he wakes up in the body of a 30-year-old man. He runs off to New York City, gets a job testing toys, falls into an office romance, and for a while, he kind of enjoys being an adult. Until it stops being fun. Eventually, he finds the Zoltar machine again and wishes to go back to being a kid. That's how it ends. He walks away from Elizabeth Perkins's character, turns back into a 12-year-old, and goes home. The credits roll while he walks down the street in his oversized suit. But that wasn't the original ending. They actually shot a longer version. In it, Josh returns to his old life and reconnects with his childhood best friend. Then, in a twist, Elizabeth Perkins' character, who's now heartbroken, finds the Zoltar machine and uses it to wish herself back into childhood too. So they meet again, both 12 years old, and the story kind of loops back around into this weird, magical romance territory. There's still a rumor that the alternate ending with young Susan aired on TV once or twice in the early 90s. It just never showed up on DVD. Total VHS-era ghost story. This one's a straight-up test screening disaster. Originally, Molly Ringwald's character ends up with Ducky, her quirky, loyal best friend played by John Cryer. They even shot it that way. Audiences hated it, like violently hated it. Turns out they wanted her with the cool guy, played by Andrew McCarthy. Problem is, by the time they reshot it, McCarthy had already shaved his head for a Broadway role, so they slapped this weird wig on him, reshot the prom scene, and hoped no one noticed. You can notice, by the way. It's a bad wig. Ironically, John Cryer's still kind of salty about it. He said test audiences were cheering for Blaine just because he was hot. He's not wrong, but the studio went with the horny teens, and the ending stuck. In case you're under 40 and haven't watched it in a while, Back to the Future is about a teenager, Marty McFly, who accidentally travels to 1955 in a time-traveling DeLorean built by his eccentric friend, Doc Brown. He almost erases his own existence, then has to make sure his parents fall in love and somehow get back to 1985 alive. By the end, Marty's back home, everything's fixed, Doc shows up again out of nowhere and says that famous line, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." The car lifts off and flies into the sky. That final moment wasn't written to set up a sequel. The writers just thought the idea of a car flying into the sky was a fun and ridiculous way to wrap things up. That's all it was supposed to be. But test audiences loved it, and Universal decided they had to make a follow-up. The visual effects team didn't even have a flying car ready when they shot it. That effect was patched in late in post. What was meant as a fun final beat turned into the launchpad for 2 more movies, a total fluke that rewrote 80s movie history. Heathers is the story of a smart, cynical teen named Veronica, played by Winona Ryder, who gets pulled into the popular crowd, 3 girls named Heather, and then helps kill them off one by one. It's dark. It's funny, and way nastier than any other teen movie from the 80s. The original ending was even darker. Veronica dies in the school explosion, and the film ends with a prom in heaven. That version was so bleak, the studio refused to release it, wouldn't even consider it. According to the screenwriter, the film would have been impossible to sell with that ending in place. So they changed it, gave Veronica a survival arc, had her shoot JD, light a cigarette off his burning body, and reclaim her life in the hallway. That wasn't part of the plan. It was a last-minute rewrite to keep the movie alive. Also, Christian Slater was basically doing a Jack Nicholson impression the whole movie. That wasn't in the script either. He just showed up with that voice and they rolled with it. John Carpenter's The Thing is now considered a masterpiece, but in 1982 it was a box office flop. Audiences hated how bleak and paranoid it was. Studios were begging for a hero leaves ending. Carpenter didn't care. Originally, they shot a version where MacReady survives alone. Clear-cut, no ambiguity. Test audiences still hated it. So Carpenter pulled that ending, cut together a quieter scene where MacReady and Childs just sit in the snow sharing a bottle of whiskey, both half dead and totally suspicious of each other. The tension? Completely accidental. The ambiguity wasn't the plan. It came together in editing. And because of that, people have spent decades arguing, is one of them the thing? Are both of them the thing? Was the whiskey a test? Carpenter's response was simple: you decide. The final goodbye between Elliot and E.T. wasn't fully scripted. Spielberg let the kids improvise it. He figured he'd just cut something together from the footage. What they shot turned out way better than expected, so they built the ending around it. They even scrapped an earlier version where Elliot's back in school still trying to contact E.T. Spielberg dropped it because the other footage played better. None of it was planned. The whole thing came together on set, by accident, and ended up being the part people remember most. This one basically created the entire psycho mistress genre. Michael Douglas plays a married guy who has a one-night stand with a woman played by Glenn Close. He thinks it's over. She does not. What follows is pure escalation. She starts calling nonstop, shows up at his apartment, fakes a pregnancy. At one point, she kidnaps his daughter from school. And yeah, she even kills the family's pet rabbit and boils it in their kitchen. That scene alone traumatized an entire generation of moviegoers. But the ending you remember wasn't the original. Originally, Glenn Close's character kills herself and frames Douglas's character for murder. Glenn Close actually fought for that ending. Then the studio showed it to a test audience and people hated it. So they reshot the whole thing. New ending. Glenn Close pops out of the bathtub with a knife and the wife shoots her dead. It plays like a horror movie. Total crowd pleaser. Audiences cheered. The movie made over $300 million. But it came at a cost. Glenn Close hated it. Said it turned a story about mental illness into a slasher flick. And it kind of did, but the studio got the hit they wanted.